Hey, I heard you were running a campaign. I'd love to join. Yeah, great. Glad to have you. What character do you have in mind? Well, I was thinking about playing a really smart character who gets his magic from mentors and reading books and stuff. Oh, so you're playing a wizard? Oh, well, no, I was thinking about playing a druid because I wanted to turn into animals and stuff. Hey guys, what's going on? Well, he wants to be a wizard-like character, but is choosing druid to turn into animals. Lore-wise, druid doesn't fit what you're kind of going for, so I would just be wizard and choose polymorph down the road. Wait, I think that's awesome. If you wanted more nature magic for your wizard, I think reflavoring it into a druid is a great idea. Well, that's okay. If it's going against lore, I can pick something else. I also have a warlock that I thought it'd be cool to get his magic from his parents when he's not supposed to. Yeah, but in the D&D world, people that get magic that way are sorcerers, so why don't you play one of those? You're kidding, that's a great unique spin. I got a rogue in my game who doesn't sneak or steal at all. In fact, he's an expert in religion and his god guides his hand to his targets. Oh, that's cool. See, now that's just a paladin. What else do you have? Well, I was also thinking about a cleric who was forced into a contract to worship a devil. You're joking, right? That's a warlock. Oh. Okay. Hey, if you're trying to get into a game, you should come by our table. I think my players would love to hear your druid idea. Really? Yeah, okay. Sorry. Whatever. Hello Acolytes! Welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker, and here we talk about all things Dungeons and Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. If you've been a follower to the channel for a while now, you would know that I have been working on a Better Classes series, where I take a unique spin on the class origins to make them a little bit different. And some are pretty tame, but some of them are kind of out there, but that's what I love to do on this channel, is challenging tropes and changing concepts to make things just a little bit more interesting and a little bit more fun. And these videos themselves have received massive support from you guys, so thank you, it's been incredible. However, some comments have been very interesting, and the reason why I'm kind of making this video, and I guess the reaction just surprised me because I never thought that I would be making this kind of video, but here we are and I'm happy to. And to give you an example of what I'm talking about here, when I made my video about bards, I would be getting comments about oh, these are just warlocks in disguise. I would get a lot of comments on certain ideas that I had that they should just be a warlock. And then when I make a video about druids, there will be people saying, oh, well, this trope just sounds like an artificer with extra steps, which I admit was pretty funny. And then I would make a video about warlocks and people would just say, oh, these tropes are just sorcerers. Now, whether these comments were in jest or really just concern for my well-being, I have no idea, but I think something was just lost in translation that I would like to address here. When I'm talking about reflavoring classes, I'm not talking about taking predetermined lore and predetermined tropes into a character idea. I'm talking about changing the lore and how we view these classes altogether. So I will be going over how I view the class system, why I view it that way, and then how I flesh that out conceptually. So starting out, here's my premise. Classes are descriptive, not prescriptive. Let me say that again. Classes are descriptive, not prescriptive, meaning that they are used to describe how your character interacts with magic and abilities in this world. They do not prescribe your character to an already fleshed out backstory or concept, or they do not place them in a category already predetermined by Wizards of the Coast. To me, these classes are guidelines, not actual rules. It's like the yes and principle from improvisation, where enacting the continuation of a story depends on the acceptance of another person's input. And you have to be careful because creativity ends as soon as you use words that are definitive and absolute, like never and always. Try to use those words as sparingly as you can. Now, I'm not saying that categories or predetermined tropes are unimportant, because they are still an essential baseline to Dungeons and Dragons. They are a foundation that continues to give a juicy archetype that really fulfills its promise on that flavor. But that's not end all be all. Perspectives can shift from person to person and how they view certain things, especially in a made up world like fantasy. It's like one person can see a 6, but another person sees a 9. Both are right, they're just different viewpoints. You can see this a little bit when in the Dungeon Master's Guide it states that clerics don't need to have a god to have their powers. I think it's on page 13. And in media, we see changes in class tropes all of the time. We'll take Harry Potter, for example, where you could argue that he is a wizard. Obviously, they call him a wizard in the films and in the books. However, in the D&D world, because he was born with magic and even had it before he went to school, you could argue that he is a sorcerer, or even a sorcerer-wizard multi-class. And another example of changing fantasy, we actually look at Tolkien in his book The Hobbit, where he used goblin to describe creatures who would be more orc-like in D&D. And then dragons in D&D, especially the chromatic ones, we know are arguably evil and keep hordes. But what about Neverending Story, or How to Train Your Dragon, or Aragon? How are these dragons different because of artistic license? Let's even look at the original usage of the word druid. Druids actually originate from the Celtic culture and were actually described as religious leaders, community heads, lore keepers, and political advisors. Hardly the swamp-lurking, animal-loving hermits that we know and love today. So I continue to view the current class system in a similar way. A fluid set of mechanics that helps make our fantasy a reality. However we wish to define our magical worlds and how we populate them. If I had an amazing idea to make goblins a waterborne race, should I not do that because the definitions of a goblin in the game is supposedly set in stone? I simply want to create my rules and my lore because I consider myself a creative person. And that's why I love this game so much. It gives me a platform to practice that creativity. It allows me to put a skeleton on the meat of my ideas to help it come to life. And that's what I want for you guys as well, the freedom to create new ideas and to expand the boundaries on your creativity. To not be scared of skirting the edges of predetermined limits. And in my opinion, the edge is where creativity begins. If you're thinking that, oh, this might be just a little bit beyond what the parameters are, you're on the right track. I just don't want people's creativity stepped on for the sake of continuity of something that's not even their own. Give me a paladin that smites with a guitar or a ranger whose favorite terrain is heaven. In a world where so many people are playing in Dungeons & Dragons, I know that I can go to any game shop and someone will be playing a classic game. And that game will be so much fun and someone will always know exactly what they're getting. But my question is, what makes your table different? Why would somebody play at your table and your game if they can get the exact same thing from someone else? So here's what I do, and I'm not saying that this is the certain way you have to do it, but it works for me. When looking at classes, stat blocks, or abilities, or monsters, I look at the mechanics first alone. I ignore the name, I ignore the lore, I ignore the descriptive text. I ask myself, what does this do? And for example, let's say the one that I'm reading, I see that it's very good at navigating and finding things. Then I ask myself, how can I explain these abilities in a unique way? For this one, what if they were good at these things because they could take a quick peek into the future, and with their connection to time, they could determine right or wrong paths? And who would be good at that? Arguably a divination wizard. However, in this case, we have a ranger reflavored to be a clairvoyant. Or I can try to look at an already established trope and flip it on its head. A druid, normally being a denizen of the nature and the forest, instead is a follower of expansion and only learns these nature magic to gain the trust of the wood elves, only to stab them in the back and claim their land as their own. Another way I do it is conceptualize my ideas first and then find mechanics that fit it. For example, I want a character that's filled with raw emotion. They are a vessel of rage that unleashes when they get too angry. The obvious pick would be a barbarian, but I pick a wild magic sorcerer and I talk to the DM about role-playing this trope at the table. Another great thing that I don't think that we realize is that classes already have blurred the lines between themselves. Some classes can bleed into other subclasses, like the nature cleric and the druid, or the swords bard and the fighter, or the arcane archer fighter and the ranger, or whispers bard and the rogue, and the list goes on and on. Rogues do not have a monopoly on sneakiness, and warlocks don't have a monopoly on getting their power from monsters. In a magical world, it is hard and should be hard to pin down a magical creature to defined parameters. And that's why multi-classing is a thing, to find a middle ground when one class doesn't define your character just right. But all in all, I don't think that this video will change the comments that I've been getting in that I showed you guys. And I'm sure that there are many things that I have overlooked, but I hope to at least start a conversation where there might not previously have been one. And I hope you feel empowered to do your own thing and set your own parameters. rules. And if someone ever gets after you for letting your imagination go wild, send them this video. Find a DM and a group that will cultivate your creativity, not squash it. And if you're a dungeon master, remember what the Dungeon Master's Guide says. As a referee, the dungeon master interprets the rules and decides when to abide by them and when to change them. The D&D rules help you and your players have a good time, but the rules aren't in charge. You are the DM and you are in charge of the game. If you think that this video added value to you, consider hitting that like button and comment below on other thoughts that you might have while watching this video. And if you wanted to continue the discussion, come visit our Discord linked below in the description. In the meantime, go out there and spread the good word of D&D and make the world a better place, both on and off your tables. See you in the next one.